Alright, so the definition of a parallelogram is two pairs of parallel sides. Make sense? Parallelogram, two pairs of parallel sides. Okay. Your definition. So a rectangle is a parallelogram. That is true. Okay, the definition of a rectangle actually says it's a parallelogram with four congruent angles. A square is a parallelogram. That is also true because a square is a rectangle, and if a rectangle is a parallelogram, well, then the square should be a parallelogram. The rhombus is also true. Don't forget, remember that the rhombus and the rectangle came together to make the square. So the rhombus and the rectangle are both parallelograms because the square is a parallelogram. The kite, that is not a parallelogram because I can draw a kite, for example, this kite, and that's definitely not a parallelogram. These sides, these opposite sides, are not parallel to each other. A trapezoid is a parallelogram. That is also going to be false because the trapezoid has exactly one pair of parallel sides. A parallelogram has exactly two pairs of parallel sides, so there's no overlap between those two definitions. Your four properties of parallelograms are going to be opposite sides are congruent. So you want to see that in the picture. So here is a lovely parallelogram. That means that these opposite sides, opposite sides. Let's do that first. So if I have this parallelogram here, these sides are opposite from each other, so they're going to be congruent. These sides are opposite from each other, so they're going to be congruent. I also have opposite angles, which are congruent. That means that in this parallelogram, these are opposite angles, the ones that are completely on the other side from each other. And this would be another pair of opposite angles. Okay, so opposite angles are completely on different sides from each other. Now, if they were right next to each other, those would be consecutive angles. So the consecutive angles are supplementary. So remember, supplementary means that they add up to 180. Supplementary means add to 180. So that means that in the parallelogram, like this, if I want to talk about angle 1 and angle 2, I know that angle 1 plus angle 2 is going to equal 180 because they're consecutive. They're right next to each other. So these would also be consecutive angles, so they add up to 180. These would also be consecutive angles. They add up to 180. These would also be consecutive angles. They add up to 180. Okay. And last but not least, the diagonals will bisect each other. Remember that bisect means to cut exactly in half. So in this parallelogram here, by drawing their diagonals, that means that this diagonal cuts this diagonal in half. So those are going to be congruent. And this diagonal cuts this diagonal in half, so they are going to be congruent. Not necessarily congruent to each other, but they cut each other in half. Yes. Oh, first of all, some critical thinking. So, what is the difference between a property and a definition? Well, a property, if we were to send you to a desert island where they don't know geometry at all, but you were to tell people, hey, there's this quadrilateral with two pairs of parallel sides, they could figure out the properties based on that definition. Definition, you would have to tell them. Okay? So, a property is proven based on the definition. Whereas the definition is just simply given. You can't really justify it. It's just, it is what it is. Okay. Remember that from our bell ringer, the rectangle is a parallelogram, the square is a parallelogram, the rhombus is a parallelogram. So that means that if these are all parallelograms, then absolutely, if you see a rectangle, you can use the properties of parallelograms for it. If you see a square, you can use the properties of parallelograms for it, etc., etc. Here's how we use it. Okay. So notice that these angles are opposite from each other. So it means that they are opposite angles. And we know from our properties that opposite angles are congruent. So that means that this would have to be 135. Now these two, these are consecutive angles. So if they are consecutive angles, that means they are supplementary. So that means that 70 plus whatever this angle is going to equal 180. So 180 minus 70 gives you 110. This angle is 110. All right, here I have some opposite sides. What do we know about opposite sides? Well, we know that they are congruent. That means that if this one's 23, this one's also going to be 23. Here we're going to use the fact that diagonals bisect each other because I know if RT is 19.8, and I'm trying to find RP, which is this whole thing right there. Well, I know that the diagonals bisect each other, so I know that this part, RT, is congruent to TP, which means that the whole thing together, RP, would be 19.8 plus 19.8, which is going to be 39.6. So use our fact that the diagonals bisect each other. For this one, we're gonna, it uses the fact that we have consecutive angles, but it has a little bit of a twist to it because I know part of this angle, but I don't know the other one. Okay. So let's use our fact that consecutive angles are supplementary. Okay. So I know that if this angle is 60, then this whole angle is going to have to be 120. So for the whole angle, because it is 180 minus 60 is going to give us 120. So that means that 52 plus whatever that is going to have to equal 120. So that means that 120 minus 52 will give us 68. So that is the measure of our missing angle. Now for something like this, we can still set up equations, but now we are going to use our fact or our properties in order to set up the equation. Okay. So for this one, well, these are consecutive angles. So I'm going to use our property that we have. Consecutive angles are supplementary. Okay. So that means when I come up here, I know that 80, this angle right here, plus 11x minus 10, this angle right here, together are going to have to equal 180. Okay, so combine your like terms, that gives you 11x plus 70 equals 180. Subtract 70 from each side, so this gives you 11x equals 110. And divide each side by 11, so x equals 10. Okay, for this one, look at the sides. So this side is 2x plus 15, this side is x plus 15. This means that I've got opposite sides. And I know that my opposite sides are congruent. So I'm going to set this up with them equaling each other because I know that the length of this side should equal the length of that side. So this means that 2x plus 15 should equal x plus 15. Okay. I'll start by subtracting each side by x. So that gives me x plus 15 equals 15. I'll subtract 15 from each side. So this gives me x equals 0. Okay, so this is just like the other one we did. So remember with me? Okay, what kind of angles are these? These are consecutive. And we know that they are supplementary, so they add up to 180. This means that 9x plus 15. So this angle right here plus 6x plus 15. This angle right here should equal up to be 180. Okay, so 9x plus 6x, that's 15x. 15 plus 15 is 30. Subtract 30 from each side. This gives me 15x equals 150 divide both sides by 15. So x is equal to 10. Okay. All right, last but not least, okay, let's use that fact that the diagonals bisect each other. Okay. So if the diagonals bisect each other, that means that when I get up here, it says that UH is 19. So UH is 19. And it says that this whole thing, FH, is 5x minus 7. Okay. Well, because the diagonals bisect each other, I know that UF is also 19, which means that I know that this whole thing, HF, should equal 19 plus 19, which is 38. So that means that 5x minus 7 should equal 38. So 5x minus 7 should equal 38. I'll add 7 to each side, so this gives me 5x equals 45. Divide both sides by 5, so x equals 9. All right, you have an exit flip, so go ahead and do that. It's in the properties worksheet. Stuff that is crossed out you do not have to do.